It's been 2 months since a clergy sexual abuse hotline was established by the Hampden County District Attorney, Anthony Gulluni. The hotline is meant to be an outlet for victims. By calling, they can report the experiences that happened to them no matter how long ago or if it had been reported in the past. DA Gulluni joined me in the studio to discuss this. I first asked him about the response so far.
We've gotten an excellent response, actually. We've had probably dozens of calls at this point. The response has been great by the public, and really the objective in some ways has been met with the people who have called. These are people who we want to communicate with directly, people who are telling us about experiences they've had with clergy abuse in various forms. And we want to remind the public that this remains an open service to them. It is staffed by trained investigators who know how to deal with the sensitivities around these kinds of cases and allegations. It's staffed really 24 hours a day, and if it's not answered immediately, please leave a message and we'll get back to folks. And it will only be 2 individuals who are trained and assigned to this task by me and by my office. So the response has been excellent.
And I think that that's an important point to have us explore a bit more. So people who have gone through this type of a trauma who might be reluctant to call and say, I don't want to be received by someone who's going to be insensitive or trigger the trauma for the person in some way. What can they expect when they make that call?
Sure. The state police detectives in my office are trained on traumatic responses. They're sensitive to these issues. So folks who call can expect to speak with one of 2 investigators who, again, have been assigned specifically by me and by my state police captain to this case. So they're particularly sensitive to the issues presented here. They're going to be, they're going to get a person on the phone who's sensitive to their issues, who's going to speak to them and be comfortable conversing just on what the folks want to talk about. Obviously our objectives are to make contact with people who have allegations of clergy abuse and sexual assault. And we want to get information. We want to continue that dialogue, but we're going to have that conversation around what that person is comfortable with at that time. And if it's merely just an introductory conversation where names and other information is not passed along, that's fine. And we're willing to continue that dialogue going forward, but we're there to provide services. And most importantly, we're really there to be in direct contact with people who believe and who tell us that they've been abused by a member of the clergy.
Of the people who have called, have there been any new charges or let's start with investigation or charges?
There is an ongoing investigation in a number of these cases. We are following up at least on information. We're obviously limited by issues around statutes of limitations as well as other things, jurisdiction and so forth, but we want to make contact with folks. And I want to remind people that this is not necessarily just abuses that have happened recently. This is abuses that go back many, many years. And if folks feel like this hasn't been addressed, or it has been addressed and they want to speak directly with law enforcement, we welcome essentially all calls. Family members, victims, and it's not only to the ends of criminal justice and law enforcement. We want to be there to provide services to victims, and that's what my office does. There's no obligation. Any services that we provide, whether it's just speaking with a victim witness advocate in my office or something beyond that, a referral, it's all free of charge. This is our responsibility as a district attorney's office. It's our responsibility to victims of all kinds in this county. So we want to encourage people to call, and then we'll flesh out what the issues are and where we go from there.
Does the current law serve victims?
It does. It's designed to, but it's also designed to protect other interests, and we respect that.
What are the other interests?
The interests around criminal justice and when, allegations get too stale and so on and so forth. That's the legislature's job. We enforce those laws and we have to abide by, of course, the statute of limitations. But there's a lot of different variables. If the person accused is out of state for a period of time, that can be the statute is told, meaning that time doesn't count against the statute. So there's a lot of different variables there, and there's different variables for the type of crime. Aggravated rapes and different assaults have different statutes. So we just want to encourage people to call and let us figure out the statute of limitations and whether a criminal charge can be pursued. But again, the call is not only around a potential charge or an investigation. It's about providing services to a victim, ensuring that law enforcement in the district attorney's office is aware of these allegations so we can do our best to kind of flesh out the issues.
Would you like to see the legislature revisit the law and either eliminate statute of limitations or streamline it? It sounds like that pretty complicated.
It's very complicated, and I think it could be simplified, and I would advocate for the elimination of statute of limitations on certain crimes, especially those involving children. Needless to say to many viewers, there's no statute of limitations on murder, so you could be charged, as we did with the case involving Lisa Ziegler, many, many years after the crime. With cases involving children who are abused, I think there is a conversation around potentially eliminating a statute of limitations.
Part of the reason that you launched this hotline a few months ago was you expressed frustration that you felt like the Springfield Diocese wasn't being as forthcoming with all the information as it could be. Have you had more recent conversations with the diocese since you launched the hotline?
There's an ongoing dialogue relative to improving the process going forward, but I stand by my comments, and I believe that there was inconsistencies and discrepancies in what the diocese was self-reporting in materials they were providing to parishioners and other statements they were making versus what law enforcement was actually getting. And really irrespective of that, we look back on this now and say, let's have direct contact with victims. We think it's inappropriate for the organization who's being accused to have the first contact with the accuser. And then that's sort of being filtered when it makes its way to law enforcement. So there's a better system in the works with the cooperation of representatives of the diocese and their legal counsel. But I think retrospectively, as we look at victims from 5 years ago or 30 years ago, we want to have the opportunity to speak with them directly, flesh out a potential criminal case, and provide them with services. So we hope we can help as an agency providing victim services.
And on balance, in terms of that discrepancy in numbers, the diocese has said that in the mid-90s, there was a different district attorney and a different reporting process under that district attorney. So they point to that as some of these discrepancies. And they said they'd make an adjustment going forward. And they also said that they didn't relay anonymous reports or those that were filed sort of through attorneys. Do you think it was simple discrepancy there or intentional omission?
I won't allege any potential crime. I won't say there was any deliberate omission or deliberate dishonesty. I think there was a system in place that was ineffective and that resulted in discrepancies, in a lack of information, at least a lack of clarity coming to law enforcement, coming in particular to my office. And again, there's an ongoing dialogue that looks forward, but looking back, we want to have direct contact with victims to ensure that we're getting the information and to ensure that we can provide services and explore criminal charges.
Your office has said, regardless of the age of the complaint, or even if it had been reported previously, you'd like to hear from people. Why is that important?
Well, it's important so we can have a direct dialogue with victims and folks around victims to ensure that we can explore potential criminal charges, to make sure that there is not an offender out there who hasn't been brought to justice and who isn't liable to continue to abuse children and commit criminal offenses. And we think that is consistent with best practices around law enforcement, right? We should be talking with victims and witnesses, and trained detectives should be having that first contact, figuring out what is at play here, instead of there being an intermediary step that essentially is, again, the accuser talking to the accused before talking to law enforcement. So we think it's best practices. We think it's, most importantly, the best interest of the victims in criminal justice that we have those direct conversations.
There was a gentleman in the Berkshires who was a survivor of clergy sexual abuse. He had actually been on a hunger strike. When he heard word of this sexual abuse hotline being launched by your office, he stopped his hunger strike. What do you think about that?
I'm happy to do my job. I'm happy to stand up for victims of sexual abuse of all ages. I'm happy to stand up for children. I'm the district attorney in Hampden County, and I have a lot of responsibilities, but I think among the most serious and solemn and important is protecting vulnerable populations, which include obviously children. And where I can step up for children and people abused by authority figures of any kind, I'm happy to do so. It's my job to do so, and I'm proud to try to make a difference.